They say experience is the best teacher, but sometimes the lessons don't come until the world has already judged you. In the story of Regina Daniels, we've watched a young woman grow, stumble and rise again under the brightest and harshest lights. But beyond the fame, luxury and headlines, there are moments, choices that shaped how the world now sees her. In this video, we are not here to mock or condemn, but to analyze what went wrong. The 7 biggest mistakes that Regina Daniels made, not to shame her, but to understand how even the smallest decisions can shift public perception and how a young woman's image can be built and broken at the same time. Because at the end of the day, the real question isn't just what she did, it's what we can all learn from it. So if you love deep reflective breakdowns like this one, where we look beyond the noise and deeper into the psychology, please take a second to subscribe. We're building a community that looks past judgment and digs into understanding. Your one click can help this channel grow. And trust me, we have so much more to uncover together. Now let's break it down, piece by piece. Because when you strip away the glitz and the fame and the headlines, what you find are a series of decisions that tell a much deeper story. So here are the 7 biggest mistakes Regina Daniels made and the lessons hidden inside each one. Regina's first and perhaps most painful mistake was living the way she did, without any kind of planning. For someone who has seen so much, endured so much, and spoken so openly about her pain, you would expect that she would have made clear, deliberate plan toward freedom. But she didn't. From all interviews, her social media posts, and the things she shared over the years, it was obvious that Regina has been tired for a very long time. She has said it herself. There were times she wanted to leave, but each time she tried, the man would label her mentally unstable, have her locked up, and keep her there until she agreed to take him back. And just like that, she would suddenly be declared mentally stable again, and they would continue as though nothing had happened. She spoke about the physical violence, the intimidation, the emotional manipulation, and how her freedom had been restricted over and over again. For anyone who has lived through that kind of life, the truth becomes clear. The marriage itself was a ticking time bomb. No one knew this man better than her. She knew his patterns, his temper, his capacity for control. She knew he was not the kind of person who would easily let go or go quietly. She knew that he was the type to fight dirty, to hold on at all costs, to make sure he remained in control no matter the damage it caused. And yet, despite knowing all this, she didn't plan. Yes, she made some financial efforts, she bought a house and tried to create some stability for herself. But that was not enough. Escaping a situation like that requires more than money. It requires emotional planning, psychological preparation, and careful timing. Regina should have left when there was calm, not when the storm had already erupted. But she left after the chaos, after the viral video where she cried and spoke of the violence being too much to bear. That was the worst possible time to go. When you live in the middle of a storm, you are leaving a man who is already alert, already watching, already ready for war. If she had left during the quiet when everything seemed peaceful, it would have caught him off guard. That is when she should have acted in silence, without noise, without all the public drama. She could have even made him comfortable, even showing him affection, giving him no reason to suspect anything. And then one day, simply walk away. No arguments, no warnings, no threats, just gone. That would have been the best way, clean, quiet, and safe. Because when you make noise, you alert the very danger you're trying to escape. Regina's story teaches a hard truth. If you already know you're living with a person who thrives on control, you cannot afford to be careless. You have to be strategic, silent, and prepared. She should have left when the world thought everything was fine, not when the chaos was already public. Because by then, she wasn't the only one aware of the storm. He was too. And when both sides are ready, only one walks away unscathed. Regina's second mistake was not playing the victim card hard enough or long enough. When she finally left the marriage, in the heat of all the chaos, one of her strongest claims was that she had been a victim of domestic violence. That was the story already out there. that she had been beaten, silenced, and abused. And in a public separation of this scale, especially when emotions are raw and the spotlight is hot, the first thing that truly matters is who controls the narrative. Once the story breaks, it's not just about truth anymore. It's about perception. It's about who tells the story better. At that point, Regina had the upper hand. The public was already leaning towards her, believing her pain, sympathizing with her tears. The smartest move would have been to stay in that space, to play the victim card long and hard until she completely owned the public emotion. But she didn't. She left the scene for a while, and when she returned, she came back smiling, glowing, looking like someone untouched by any kind of trauma. That singular act shifted the narrative. When you tell the world you have been beaten and broken, you can't just return acting as if nothing happened. The human mind needs to see the scars to believe the story. People need to see your tears, your pain, your fear. They need to connect emotionally to your suffering before they can truly stand by you. Regina didn't give them that chance. She came back too strong, too bright, and too quickly. In a society like ours where emotion drives perception, the victim's card isn't weakness, it's strategy. A woman's tears move people faster than her words ever can. If Regina had stayed in that space of visible pain, crying, shaking, looking traumatized, the public would have held her close, defended her, and turned against her abuser with full force. She would have taken control of the story before the man had the chance to twist it. But instead, her return to social media painted a different picture. The smiling photos, the outing with friends, the drinks, the laughter, it all gave the impression that she was fine. And when you appear fine, people start to doubt the depth of your pain. They begin to wonder if the story was exaggerated, if maybe it wasn't as bad as you said. And that's how sympathy fits. Not because the story changed, but because the tone did. Her second mistake wasn't just about what she said, it was about what she showed. She failed to play the victim role long enough to solidify herself as the one wronged. In a world where perception often overweighs truth, she needed to hold that image tightly, to let the public see the tears before the recovery, the pain before the strength. That would have cemented her place in people's hearts and given her total control over how the story unfolded. Her third mistake was showing off the private jet and the house she bought. Now let's be clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with her buying a house or flying a private jet if she has the money to do so. She has every right to live well, to enjoy the fruits of her labor, and to build a new life for herself. But the mistake wasn't in the purchase, it was in the display. Showing it on social media, especially at that particular time, was one of the worst moves she could have made. Because here's the thing, when you live a marriage in chaos, when the story is already out there and it's about violence, abuse, and trauma, you have to be very careful about what you do next. Public perception is fragile. People are watching closely. The same audience that sympathized with your tears can turn around and question your sincerity if your actions don't match your story. So yes, buy your house, yes, fly your private jet, but why post it? Why parade it on social media for everyone to see, especially when the dust from your story hasn't even settled? That single act changed the narrative again. Instead of people focusing on her pain, they started questioning her motives. It suddenly looked like she had everything planned out. Like the chaos, the crying, and the abuse narrative were all part of a grand exit strategy to buy freedom and live the luxury life she wanted. That's the impression it gave. And once the public starts asking questions like, are you sure she didn't plan all this? Or was the whole thing just a setup? You've already lost control of your story. If Regina had left quietly, rebuilt her life silently, and then months later started showing her achievements, the story would have been entirely different. It would have looked like a woman who rose from pain, who rebuilt from ashes, who triumphed over her trauma. But showing it all off immediately after the chaos made it seem like a performance, like a woman too eager to prove she was doing fine. And when you rush to prove you're fine, people start believing you were never broken in the first place. It wasn't just about what the public thought though, it was also about the message she was sending to her husband, whether she realized it or not. Her actions were like a dare, a challenge. She was saying, yes, I've left you. Yes, I'm moving on. I've bought my house, I'm flying private jets, and I'm doing better without you. But that kind of bold display can easily trigger a man like the one she left. A man who thrives on control, who can't stand the idea of losing power, and who sees public humiliation as an unforgivable insult. What she did, in a sense, was rubbing salt into an open wound. The man, who might have still believed that things could eventually calm down and they could find their way back to each other, suddenly saw her move as a declaration of finality. Buying a house in a different city said, I'm done for good. Posting about it, and I'm proud of it. It wasn't just independence, it was defiance. And in situations like this, defiance can be dangerous. Regina's show of success came too soon, too loud, and way too public. She should have waited until the noise died down, until the dust settled, before revealing any of her new achievements. Sometimes silence is more powerful than proof. Sometimes the best way to win is to disappear, not to declare victory. Regina's fourth mistake was allowing her family to talk too much. When the chaos first broke out, when emotions were high and everyone was watching, the people closest to her should have been silent, calm, strategic, measured, but they weren't. Her brother Sammy was the first to speak, and when he did, he said a lot. He made posts, threw subtle jabs, dropped comments that carried heavy undertones, words that might have felt satisfying in the moment, but were far from ideal. He said things that painted her husband as weak, as fraudulent, as undeserving, and in doing so, he shifted attention away from the real issue. The story stopped being about Regina's pain and started being about what her brother said. And when Sammy was arrested, instead of the family retreating into silence and strategy, another voice rose, her mother's. She spoke too much, said too much, and in the process lost control of the narrative that Regina had been struggling to hold on to. She said things about how they had helped the daughter's husband financially, about how the man wasn't as rich as he appeared, about how he was biting the finger that fed him. Statements like this might sound like defense, but they often come off as provocation. And in a situation already charged with public emotion, provocation is the last thing you need. The more her family spoke, the more noise they created, the more ammunition they handed to the man they were speaking against. Because words doesn't just disappear, they linger, they echo, they can and will be used against you. Every post, every insult, every emotional outburst became a piece of evidence, a new weapon for him to use in court, in public opinion, and in his own narrative. And just as her mother's words were still stirring up attention, another brother, Sweezy, started his own round of statements. There were fresh accusations, old wounds reopened, more claims and counterclaims. It became a total mess. At that point, the story wasn't about Regina anymore. It wasn't about domestic violence, pain or survival. It had turned into a family versus family fight. A public drama that diluted her credibility and gave her husband room to breathe, regroup, and retaliate. What Regina should have done was simple: silence. She should have drawn the line and told her family to stay out of the media, to stay off social media platforms. Every word her family spoke gave her husband something new to work with. The insults, the accusations, the emotional outbursts, all of it became the foundation for a legal case, for arrests, for public backlash. The man didn't have to dig for evidence, it was handed to him. And that's the tragedy of talking too much. You end up giving your enemy the tool to destroy you. Regina's fifth mistake was publicly accepting to be a druggie. Out of all the things she could have done wrong, this was by far one of the most catastrophic. When the chaos first broke out and she accused her husband of domestic violence, his immediate counterattack was that she was mentally unstable because of drug abuse. He claimed to have toxicology reports proving that she had a high level of controlled substances in her system. At first, it seemed like one of those defensive tactics abusers often use, deflecting blame, turning the story around, painting the victim as the problem. But what nobody expected was that Regina would later come out and in her own words, confirmed the accusations. She admitted publicly, yes, publicly, that she had used drugs. But she tried to explain it away by saying it was her husband who first introduced her to it. According to her, he encouraged her to take it, claiming it made her more relaxed, more approachable, more exciting, and more desirable. And while that may have been the truth, the sad reality is that to the public, none of that explanation mattered. All they heard was her saying, "Yes, I take drugs." That one admission erased every ounce of sympathy she had built, every credibility point she had earned, and every bit of moral high ground she had left. She might have had toxicology reports against her, yes, but she didn't need to validate them. Denial would have been a much stronger strategy. She could have claimed she didn't know when the tests were taken, or that she had been drugged without her knowledge, or that something had been slipped into her drink. Just claim that they did this to you intentionally so they can carry out this test and wave it over your head as some sort of blackmail whenever you want to leave. You could have twisted and turned this story to your favor. Anything that would have cast doubt on the so-called evidence. There were 1,000 narratives she could have crafted. Even if she was guilty, that would have kept her public image intact. But she chose the worst possible route. She confirmed it. At that point, the damage wasn't just about her reputation. It became legal. That admission gave her husband everything he needed. It strengthened his claim that she was unstable, that she couldn't be trusted to care for herself or for the children. It gave him leverage in court, in the media, and in the eyes of the public. Because once a woman admits to being on drugs, regardless of the context, she becomes the villain in her own story. The narrative flips immediately. He becomes the concerned husband who wants her to get help. She becomes the troubled wife who needs rehabilitation. She could have stayed silent, she could have waited for court, she could have let her lawyers speak, but by coming out publicly to admit it, she stripped herself of every strategic advantage she had left. The public doesn't always care about explanations. They care about impressions, and the impression she created was one of instability. In a culture that already doubts women when they speak out, she gave her critics the easiest argument. See, the man was right all along. Her next mistake, the cyst, is showing emotional instability. It played out in two major ways. 1, by bringing her children into the mix, and 2, by suggesting in one of her emotional outbursts that she might actually go back to her husband. Now here's the thing. As a mother, caring for your children is natural. But in a situation like this, when emotions, power, and perception are all tangled together, sometimes the best weapon you have is restraint. One of Regina's greatest strengths early on was the perception that she had detached herself completely, that she had left and nothing, not even the children, could pull her back. It wasn't about being a bad mother. It was about being a strategic one. Because a man like that, one who understands emotional leverage, will always use what you love most to control you. Children are every mother's weakness, and when a man knows that, he weaponizes it. He'll dangle them before you, manipulate your emotions, and force your hand. But when you act like you've moved on, like you've accepted your reality, like the children are no longer his key to breaking you, you disarm him. You take away his greatest tool. But Regina broke that stance. She started talking publicly about how she was going to fight for her children, how she was going to take them back, how she wouldn't let anyone take them away from her. Those words, though emotional, gave her husband exactly what he needed. Proof that she still cared deeply. Proof that the children were her soft spot. And from that moment, he knew where to hit her hardest. Every move he made after that could now be designed to hurt her through them. Then came another emotional crack. The day she said she would go back if that's what it would take to fix things. That one statement alone undid weeks of perceived strength. Because once you tell a man like that there's still a door open, he will never stop knocking. He will keep pressing. He will keep pushing. He will keep testing how far he can go before you break again. And the truth is, you don't even have to go back. Just suggesting that you might go back if this thing gets out of hand is already enough. It already tells him that if he keeps pushing, if he keeps pressing harder, you'll be forced to come back. That's the power of perception. Once your opponent believes you can be emotionally swayed, you lose control of the game. The whole situation stops being about justice or healing. It becomes about endurance. Who can hold their ground longer? And the moment she let her emotions spill over publicly, talking about the children, expressing the possibility of returning, she showed that she could be broken emotionally. Regina's earlier silence was power. Her emotional distance was an armor. But when she started reacting out of emotion instead of strategy, she lost that edge. She stopped being unpredictable. She became readable. And once you become readable, you become controllable. Her seventh mistake is two things mixed into one. First, getting involved in those private tapes that her husband or she, whoever, I don't know, allegedly recorded. And second, not having any proof of her own to defend herself. This mistake was huge because it showed she wasn't thinking ahead, neither was she thinking critically. Let's start with the tips. Whether they truly exist or not, the fact that people believe they might is already dangerous. A man who has your private videos has power over you. And when the relationship turns bad, he can use that power to embarrass or control you. If it's true that she was forced or pressured into making those videos, that's terrible. But even then, she should have started thinking like someone preparing for a battle. She already knew the kind of man she was dealing with. She has said before that he was controlling, violent, and manipulative. So why didn't she keep any proof? Not at all, for herself. 6 years in that house, 6 whole years of everything she claimed to have gone through, and yet not one voice recording, not one video, not even a chat or message that could prove what she was saying. Nothing. That was where she failed. When you're in a situation where someone is threatening or mistreating you, you must start thinking critically and smart. Save messages, record phone calls, keep screenshots. Have someone you trust record what's going on secretly if it's safe to do so. Those small pieces of proof can save you later, especially when things go public or reach the court. But Regina didn't do that. It became her word against his, and that's not a fair fight when the other person has more power and influence. Even if she had been collecting proof secretly, she could have used this smartly, not on social media, not for attention, but at the right time with her lawyers, in court, or even through trusted sources if she needed to show the truth. That would have given her story more strength and credibility. And if at all she had a video, a single video where he was, beating her up or maltreating her, by now she should have released it. In fact, it should have been one of the things she should have released to back up her claim of domestic violence. And that alone would have dealt a terrible blow to his image, his status, his career, basically everything. It would have created this big hole in the entire narrative he was creating. At the end of the day, when you're fighting someone more powerful than you are, especially someone who knows your weakness, you must think critically. You must protect yourself, gather proof, keep records, plan for the worst, even while hoping for the best. Regina didn't do that. She didn't prepare, and now everything he has or claims to have is being used against her, while she has nothing to defend herself with. In the end, Regina's story isn't just about one woman's mistake. It's about what happens when emotion takes the driver's seat and strategy gets left behind. Every wrong move made her weaker. Every reaction gave him more control. Maybe her story will serve as a reminder that sometimes silence, planning, and patience are louder than chaos.